Hello, everyone. My name is Francesca with the League of Women Voters, and I will be your moderator for this virtual candidate forum this evening. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has taken time this evening to get on yet another Zoom. I know we're all suffering from Zoom fatigue, and the fact that you decided to spend your time here tonight learning about who is on your ballot is really impressive and respectable, and it means the world to us here at the League of Women Voters. We also want to make a huge shout out to the University City Community Association, our host partner for the event this evening. They've been an absolutely amazing partner to us, and it's been great working with them. Finally, we also, even though we miss seeing you in person, we are reaching more people than ever via Zoom who can hear directly from the candidates to help make this important decision on the ballot. If you have any questions, please look in the chat box to find out how to reach us. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. Our Voters Edge website, which you'll also find in the chat, is your online resource for more information about the candidates, ballot issues, and detailed voting information. All candidates for local offices have been invited to include their information there with no cost to them at all. I expect that both candidates have already included all their information there, so anything they say tonight, you can probably follow up and find it on Voters Edge. You'll find a link to Voters Edge in the chat. The League moderates candidate forums using a format that is fair and informative. We have asked the candidates to keep to the issues of the position rather than personal attacks, because our goal is for voters to be able to learn more about candidates than they get from campaign ads or social media. The views expressed are those of the candidates, not of the League of Women Voters. Sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement by the sponsor or by the League of any candidate. We are recording this forum and it will be available unedited from beginning to end to the public on our website, which you will also be able to find in the chat. We have asked attendees to submit questions beforehand, but you can also submit questions via the chat and we can add them as we go along. Please remember to use civility and respect in your wording with your questions and frame them so both candidates have an opportunity to answer. Assisting us tonight are lead question screeners Jane Andrews and Gail Mackler. The screener from our host group is Katie Nelson Rodolico, and she's been absolutely incredible in this process. Our timekeeper is Jean Widener, and our Zoom administrator is Francis Cuddio. We will adjourn by 8:30 p.m. This forum is for the office of City Council District 1. All viable candidates were invited, and they are all participating this evening. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 2 minutes for their closing, and 1 minute to respond to each question from the audience. We will alternate who answers each question first. Prior to the start of this event, the order of speaking was determined randomly. Will give the first opening statement, and Joe will have the first closing statement. So Will, your opening statement, please, followed by Joe. Thank you very much.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us tonight at this wonderful event. Thank you for the League of Women Voters and the UCCA for putting this on. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Will Moore. I'm running for City Council District 1. I am a former University City resident, used to live over on Cather Avenue, over in the far east side of UC. Beautiful community, really the heart of the district. I am a longtime volunteer. I was a Peace Corps volunteer right out of college. Went to Georgia Tech, was a graduate of Columbia Law, and I've been out here practicing law, representing small businesses, mid-sized businesses, everybody from the, some software companies to the Little Rascals Soccer Club up here in Carmel Valley. I think they have some classes for the Tykes down in UC as well, and down in Stanley Park. And those are the sorts of people I've represented for my entire career, looking out for the little guy. I am been active in the community, helped to found the San Diego Leadership Alliance, the Business for Good, the American Constitution Society chapter here in San Diego. And that leadership throughout this community for a very long time has earned me a broad base of support from right to left, really bringing people together, Chamber of Commerce and labor at the same time. Folks like our own John Lee Evans here in this community, twice as many current and former elected officials have endorsed my campaign as the other candidates. And that's because I've demonstrated that capacity, that leadership, that understanding of the issues. And I am somebody who's really concerned about the future of San Diego. We need to keep our eyes on the prize, look forward towards 2040, 2050, 2060. What kind of city are we leaving for our children? Cities are built on a very long scale, and we need to think about how we're going to plan for their futures. And that's what I'm planning to do here at the City Council. I appreciate your time tonight, and I look forward to the questions. Thanks.
Wonderful, Joe.
Okay. Well, thank you to the League and to UCCA for hosting this event. I'm honored to be here, having attended many UCCA and planning group and the planning group update meetings here in University City, and actually tackled a few technical issues over the years. You know, we come to this in a bit of a cloud. You know, the pandemic, of course, has affected so many residents, small businesses, and our students who can't go into class and maintain their education. But now we have the tragic incident with the rabbi and being attacked and the racial slurs that amount to a hate crime. And I appreciate the UCCA convening a community conversation about that, and the police department coming out and talking about what they're doing on this. And as I noted at the UCCA meeting, I appreciated the captain took ownership that the initial response was not what it should have been. And he is going to look into that without getting into any specifics. That is really a key to building police community relationships, which I know is very strong here in University City. And we certainly want to see that continue. And the lack of a patrol car highlights the need that we sometimes need more police to make sure we have our public safety. But I want to just talk briefly about the campaign. I'm very honored that we have continued to build on our grassroots campaign, with most of the fundraising coming from people who live here in the district. That's that first sign of voting. They know my work, they appreciate that. And those who have endorsed me appreciate the leadership that I bring. They're tired of those who are fighters and go negative. They're looking for people that actually sit back, listen, bring everybody to the table and build that consensus and coalitions move forward. And at the end of the day, I think the conversation for this UC residents is, who do you want to make a decision on your community plan update? That is going to be your vision for the next 20, 30 years. I'm Joe LaCava. I'm hoping to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you for both of your opening statements. We're going to go ahead and transition into questions now. To open, what do you think is the most pressing need in District 1? What's our biggest issue and how would you address it? And Joe, we'll go ahead and start with you this time.
Sure. You know, that's a basic question, but has many layers to it. For District 1, I'm going to focus on protecting the environment. It helps our quality of life. The city has not done a good job of protecting the open space and the natural habitat. We failed to really deal with the water quality aspects that affects our Rose Creek and the lagoons that this district feeds into, both our mid-level and our northerly area. We have a responsibility not only for the people who live here today, but for future generations to protect that habitat. It goes to our quality of life. Those lagoons and saltwater marshes are going to be important when we start dealing with sea level rise and someplace for that water to go and be absorbed and to deal with the rainwater. You know, I watched that water come down Governor Drive during a rainstorm last winter, and I think you all know it's pretty ugly. We have to and we must do better.
Thank you. Will?
I think that in District 1, our number one problem really in the district is definitely our crumbling infrastructure. We have problems from, you know, obviously there's Hillside Drive in La Jolla, which is kind of the poster child for a crumbling thing that can be fixed. But we also have improvements we need to make in our transit system and just our old road system that is, you know, getting long in the tooth and needs to be updated. I think Governor Drive is the classic example of this kind of 60s piece of road technology that we could really do a better job, because it's this gulf that runs through the South UC community. You can't let your kids go out and, you know, go back and forth across the street. People are going 40, 50, 60 miles an hour up and down there. And when you're in the car, you don't even realize consciously how fast you're going until you look down at the speedometer. And we need to reevaluate the way we've done some of those things. We also need to get bike lanes on our local streets so you can actually get around the community more easily. UC could be a much more lovely place if we just focused on getting that infrastructure fixed.
Thank you, Will. For our next question, I think you had talked about this for a moment in your opening statements, but we'd love to dive in a little more. How did you become active in the community, and what are your specific experiences with issues in University City? And Will, we'll go ahead and start with you this time.
I became active in the community. I've been active in my community since I graduated from high school. I grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in America. I got a scholarship to Georgia Tech. I was lucky to get that ticket out, and I became a Peace Corps volunteer. I've always been very much committed. Did a full tour in Tambacounda, Senegal, and I've been active here in this community ever since I got here. I've walked precincts for Sherry Lightner back in 2008. And the issues we have here in University City and in District 1 are such that, like, I have personal connections. Obviously, I drive on the roads. Our flyover zone is very important to me. That plane crash that happened over in West UC was about a block from my house while I was in my house. So that was definitely something that focuses the mind on these jets that are going over, and we need to work with Miramar and making sure that that's all safe. So I identify very strongly with the issues in this community and want to solve them.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, that's a great question. I've been active as a community leader, as an activist for over 16 years. And I mean, as a active individual who balanced his business with meeting the needs of individuals and businesses and organizations. My sister-in-law and her family live in South UC, and my brother-in-law lives in North UC. And they're the ones that initially got my attention. I can remember Sandy Lippy asking me to jump into some of the traffic calming and pedestrian safety issues back in the day. And that was probably my first introduction. But it was in terms of being brought in about the Rose Canyon and the heated discussions about the Regents Road Bridge, which the city has finally made some affirmative decisions and has taken that out of the community plan, but being involved in those conversations, listening to local leaders about the open space issues that I mentioned, about the properties that are at risk. So I've been involved for many years and watching the community plan update, going to just about every meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
I forgot that it was 1 minute now.
We switched.
That was a tough one to do in 1 minute for both of us. Yeah.
Eyes on the time. And I think, Will, you already actually created a perfect transition here. So there are concerns that there are errant and illegal flight departures from Main Core Air Station Miramar. How will you work with the FAA and the USMC to ensure that military flights stay within the prescribed flight plan?
Well, as a Columbia educated lawyer who has some experience dealing with federal preemption issues, the truth is we have to just negotiate as best we can. I think a lot of the people at this meeting were at that about a year and a half ago, a UC planning group meeting where we got what was really kind of a stern talking to that I felt was really inappropriate from the commandant at Miramar. And I think this community deserves more respect than it's gotten. And I think we need some strong leadership to explain and work with our federal counterparts that is not how we should be spoken to as a community. Now, we recognize we have national defense reasons to have to practice, flying the airplanes back and forth. But we should be able to feel safe in our community, in our entire community. And we should make sure that those planes stay in the flight path. Obviously, we don't have power over them. That's not the way the military and the federal government work with the city, but we do need to be more assertive with the way we deal with that situation.
Thank you, Will. All right, Joe?
Well, thank you. It is a key issue, especially for those people who live on the east side. I remember when Sherry Lightner was sworn in, she immediately had to go out to that very tragic situation. Day one of being sworn in, I'm going to be writing a letter to the base commander to start that dialogue right off the bat. It is a tough conversation. We don't have much authority in that, but we're not asking for much. We're just asking for the flights to stay within the prescribed flight path. And we do know that there are hot shots when there are visiting commands that come through that apparently do not have anybody watching over them. But we have to work with the base commander to figure out how we're going to deal with that. But, I'm not going to wait for this issue to be raised by the community. We know it. We'll be jumping in and we'll try to bring as much pressure as we can, which is of course limited, but that doesn't mean we stay silent. We keep pushing forward. So I look forward to that conversation with the base commander.
Thank you, Joe. Switching gears a little bit, we would love to understand, the community would love to understand, what is your opinion on Proposition 15 for school and communities first? And Joe, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure. I have taken a no position on Prop 15. That was something that I developed when I first heard about it in 2019. I don't think it's the right thing at the right time. There is some inequities in the original Prop 13 that ought to be addressed, but this was a wrong way to go about it. And with the COVID, the impact it will have, potential impact, I think it's the wrong thing. So I'll be voting no on Prop 15. It breaks my heart because my wife is a school teacher, and we certainly know that schools are traditionally underfunded. Our cities could use additional revenue, of course, even though we haven't proven that we can use the revenue we have very efficiently. But I've taken a no position on that. I've lost 2 endorsements because I've taken that no position, including my wife's teacher union on that. So.
Thank you, Joe. Well,
I am in favor of Prop 15. I think it's a good idea. I think right now we have a situation in California where we have this income tax that is pretty huge, and then we all pay these sales taxes and gas taxes, which are pretty regressive, and really local governments fund themselves off of these regressive taxes. And all the while, folks that buy a new business and get some fancy lawyering, and they can take their tax basis all the way back to 1975 in some cases, and that's just not the right way to do. I'd like to get Prop 15 passed. I'd like to make sure that gets phased in a reasonable way where we protect small businesses. But I'd also like to take that opportunity to, instead of just raising the overall tax rate, to maybe come down on some of those other regressive taxes, so that it can be we can live in a more equitable society and fund our city services and state services in a way that's really fair to everybody, so that, say, Disneyland isn't paying the same taxes it was in 1980.
thank you, Will. Switching topics once again, the placement of affordable housing in any city is a controversial issue. What is your position on placing affordable housing in District 1 or in the city of San Diego as a whole? And Will, if you can go ahead and start us off, please.
Well, listen, your options are to have places for people to live or to have fewer people. I have a 16-year-old son. A lot of the people here in the nice bedroom community of University City have kids, because we have these great little schools like Stanley and UCCH. I never get the initials of UC High right. But we all have concern for where our kids are going to live, and if we don't have places for them to move to, they're all going to move out to Flagstaff, and we're going to have to raise our grandkids by Skype, and nobody wants that. So I'm concerned with making sure we get affordable housing and appropriate housing in all of our communities. I don't think there's such thing as a community that's not appropriate for affordable housing, because that kind of assumes that we like segregation, and that's not what we like. We're all very progressive adult people here in 2020. And so I think we can get this job done. I think that there's some scare things that have happened over the years that have made us react to the word a little bit, but I think this is definitely a thing that this community can come together and get done.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
Sure. Let's be clear that we're not talking about affordable as defined by the marketing departments of home builders, but we're talking about income restricted for our moderate and low income families. We've seen a perfect example up in Pacific Highlands Ranch. 20% of those units are income restricted, and they've done a fabulous job with that. I think the conversation is really about the elected official leading the conversation and preparing the community. And I'm certainly prepared to do that. Let's not have the surprises that sometimes happens with some of these projects, and people are caught unaware. So at the very beginning of my service as a council member, I'll be talking about income restricted housing. It's going to be tough. The land is very expensive here in District 1. We can't ignore that. But we do have city-owned land that we can take advantage of. We can look to inclusionary. We can look at YIGBY units on religious facilities. We can look at workfare housing on some of our big parking lots. There are lots of options, but the council member has to lead in this conversation.
Thank you, Joe. Switching topics, but staying a little bit on topic as far as housing, what is your position on short-term vacation rentals or short-term occupancy units? And Joe, if you could start us, please.
Sure. I've been in this fight for several years, and it's been frustrating because we've had 2 or 3 good attempts at dealing with this, and the big bully platforms kill those ideas. So we've been working very hard. I am okay with home sharing and the many layers of that. Back bedroom, a guest house, the other half of a duplex. That works because the owner stays present and can control the tenants they rent to, and the neighbors have a very easy vehicle to complain. It is the whole house rentals that I find unacceptable. If whether there's 5, 6, 7,000 of them, those are being taken out of the housing supply for San Diegans to live in. When you talk about affordability, you talk about a crisis, you have to include that in the conversation. So let's go back to what the original law says. Whole house rentals are not permitted. Let's legalize home sharing, and let's get a backbone like a lot of cities up and down California have done, and regulate them appropriately, keep them out of our single family neighborhoods.
Thank you, Joe. Well,
Well, I think that what we need to do is figure out a regulation that works, pass it, and enforce that law under the deal that we make. I think that what we've had over the past couple of years in San Diego is some politicians saying, "Oh, let's just enforce the law." The city attorney said they were illegal like 4 years ago in one opinion. It's never been tested in court, by the way. And I think that that I call that grandstanding and anarchy. It doesn't actually accomplish anything. It just keeps the anarchy going so that it's wild, wild west out here. We need to figure out a way to get a deal done. And there's a deal on the table right now that actually looks pretty reasonable, reduces STVRs by 70% of what they currently are, and concentrates them down in Mission Beach, which is kind of a more appropriate place to be, and helps our community move forward with regulations, with the ability to call people on quality of life issues and actually have the resources to enforce those things. I think it's time to make something happen rather than just have an ideal that's never actually going to get implemented.
thank you. And just, I feel like you kind of included this in your statement just now, both of you, but just to make sure we have it on the record, a current short-term vacation rental proposal by Dr. Jen Campbell would eliminate 70% of the city's STVRs. Do you think this proposal should go to the voters? And Will, you can start us off.
I think that's within the scope of what the city council will be able to pass.
Perfect. Thank you, Will. And Joe?
I think your question whether it should go to the voters.
Yes.
If it goes to the voters, I think it will be matched by Airbnb, who doesn't like this and will actually be proposing something that will be much more liberal. As I said, Barbara Breed passed an ordinance. The council agreed, the mayor agreed, and Airbnb came through and smashed it. So we've actually done the work that needs to be done. We just got these bully platforms to keep killing it. I think this is the job for the city council and the mayor to take on, along with the city attorney, and for us to do our job. Once you get it passed by the voters, you're stuck with it. You can't change it. You can't modify it. You can't say, well, we didn't quite get it right. So I would not be in favor of it going to the voters. I would continue to believe that as a city council member, I can lead that conversation and make sure that we do right by our single family neighborhoods here in District 1 and across our city. The current proposal doesn't concentrate in Mission Beach. It spreads them in every community.
Thank you, Joe. And this is our last question for this lovely hot topic. Where do each of you stand on enforcing the municipal codes in regard to short-term vacation rentals? And do you anticipate litigation on this issue in the future? And we're going to start with you, Joe.
Well, litigation is always, I think you can expect it with most things. And but what you'll probably get is Airbnb doing another petition drive and killing whatever proposal comes through. We had a number of candidates who campaigned on the idea that they would enforce the law. With all due respect, Dr. Jen Campbell campaigned on that. City Attorney Mara Elliott campaigned on that. And then things change, and one can only imagine the reason those change. We've never really tested the idea and gone after really the big investors that soak up so many of our residential homes, taking them away from San Diegans and handing them over to investors and the tourist industry. So let's get serious about who we are. We're a city of laws. Let's enforce the laws. And let's start that conversation now. And I look forward to leading on that as the next council member.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, folks, I am a Columbia trained attorney with 18 years of experience, a lot of it in litigation. And I will tell you, if somebody says, hey, I got this thing I'm going to do, and they do it, they threaten that for 3 or 4 years, they're not going to do it because they don't have it. They don't have it in front of a court of law. You can say enforce the law, but frankly, if folks thought that that was something that was actually the law and not just a city attorney opinion, which is a little bit aspirational, we hope it's the law. Maybe we think it's the law. If we thought we were going to win the court of law with that, probably already been doing it. So I think it's an empty talking point. I think this enforce the law thing is great rhetoric, but I don't think it does us any good. And the longer we go on saying that, the less likely it is that we're going to focus on the actual need to make a deal. And we do have something reasonable on the table that would actually cut these things by 70%. And that's a pretty good deal. And I think we should start talking about the practicality of what we want to get done instead of waving the flag.
Thank you, Will. Switching gears again a little, what is your opinion on the Regents Road Bridge? Should it be added back in? Would you support a scaled down bicycle path across that bridge? Please explain your answer. Well, if you could start us off, please.
The Regents Road Bridge, all right. So time, good. The Regents Road Bridge is a controversy that's divided this community for a really long time. The Regents Road Bridge, I want to be very clear with everybody, is not going to happen. I do not support it. I think that it's something we need to move on from. I have very good friends on both sides of this issue who I like and personally care a lot about, but it's over. It's over, folks. And I think that it's time to move on because we have problems in our community that are festering that need to get dealt with. We got the weird three-way stop thing at the end of Stressman and Governor. We have Governor Drive itself. We have no way to get around from South UC to North UC on a bicycle safely. And we need to, get some bike lanes up Genesee, and we don't need to put those in the protected areas. There are better things for us to concentrate. And I love this community so much, and this old issue from many, many years ago that really needs to stop. I'm going to tell you no.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, that is certainly one area where the two of us agree. The city put a lot of work into making the decision to remove the bridge from the community plan a few years ago. And then I was grateful when the city stood firm and said, as we're proceeding through this community plan update, we're not going to reintroduce the bridge in that conversation again. I think everybody is well aware of how divisive it has been over the years. But when I was knocking on doors and now when I'm phone banking, the conversation doesn't come up the same. There's still a few people on both the west and the east side that still bring it up, of course, but it's not the same level of conversation. So what we really need to do is focus about where we are, looking at the opportunity to redo the developer impact fees and consolidate them with North UC, as the city has been talking about, and really get that community plan update right in terms of the mobility, bike lanes, and road work that needs to be done to serve this larger community.
Thank you, Joe. I think this was brought up earlier, but just to make sure that we touch on all points here, do you support eliminating traffic lanes on Governor Drive to create bike lanes? And Joe, if you could start us, please.
Yeah, I am very honored to be endorsed by Bike San Diego. I think we saw a pretty radical change in the bicycle use during the pandemic, one of those tiny silver linings. And you cut out a little bit, but I think what you said about eliminating traffic lanes in order to install bike lanes, what we've seen here in my community of Bird Rock was by eliminating traffic lanes, we were still able to convey the same amount of traffic, but it provided an effective traffic calming measure. So it has a dual impact, a positive impact, I should say. So I'm looking forward to working with the community to figure out how we can introduce the bike lanes, be strategic about it, and make sure that the vehicles and the pedestrians and the bicyclists are safe in re-engineering our roads to really be multimodal and make it safe for every University City resident and the employees who chose to ride their bikes through the community as they go to work.
Thank you, Joe. Well,
yeah, I think Governor is one of those streets that could stand to be just rethought. We have, people go, and I used to live right there on Cather, and people go 40, 50, 60 miles an hour down that street without even thinking about it. You can just get in that zone and go. And the little sign on the side of the road that says 35, that's not what makes the speed of the road. This road itself makes the speed of the road. Road design does that. And I think governor could stand to get some tender loving care and a rethink, because right now it's this giant gulf that divides north and south, south UC, north south UC and south south UC. And I think it could stand to be redone. The question, as Joe, I think, pretty eloquently said, it's throughput. It's how many cars get where they're going quickly enough. And right now we go 60 miles an hour down Genesee from Gulf Strand to Carl's Jr., and then we all stop for several minutes when we get to Genesee. And that's just not the way a modern road should work. And we can do a lot better than that.
Thank you, Will. Would you support changing the charter to stop the city from selling off city-owned land? Bill, if you could please take this first.
Oh, me first. I don't think that would be appropriate to change the city charter to stop the city from selling city-owned land. There's a lot of city-owned land, and sometimes you need to, I've done land deals between people. I did more of that back in the day. Between like two folks have neighboring land, and you got to sell 1 foot of space. And if you put that sort of thing in the charter, you just muck everything up and shut everything down. And that's just bad governance. And we don't need that sort of thing in the Constitution. You look at the United States Constitution, and it's very simple. It has the rules of how the government is structured, and then you send the people to go and pass the laws. And I think that's a much better way to do things than shut everything down within the bounds of the charter. I think it's bad charter drafting, it's bad law, and it's just a bad way to run a city. So no, I would not support that.
Thank you. Joe?
And I also would not support amending the charter as you suggest. What we have to really look at is a total revamp of the real estate department and a mayor's office that actually knows how to manage the real estate department. We've obviously seen some very bad examples over the past few years. And I'll add a few more that most folks may not be thinking about. We've talked earlier about income restricted housing and how expensive it is to build that. One of the best tools the city has is its city-owned land and be able to throw the land into the deal, not necessarily as a sale, but as maybe a $1 a year lease in order to meet this social need for income restricted housing. I think we've missed some golden opportunities in the sports arena deal, and there has been some others. MTS has jumped on this idea to make their land available. That's where we need to refocus, and we need to make sure that we have top-notch management in the real estate to protect the interest of the taxpayers and the city as a whole. But that's the way to go about it.
Thank you, Joe. And final question here. What is your opinion on the Complete Communities proposal, which encourages development near transit? And Joe, if you could start, please.
Sure. Well, there's 3 components to that. The mobility seems to have widespread support, and so we're good with that. The park component has gotten a lot of flack. I'm actually supportive of the park one. I knew this was coming. It's long overdue. It's time that the city stop promising parks and communities that they will never deliver on. Del Mar Heights here in District 1 has promised 17 acres of park, and they have 0 acres right now. How long are we going to continue this fantasy? It just makes people cynical about government and builds in an automatic opposition to new development. But the residential component needs a lot of work. The identified problem was well taken. The goal is very noble, but how they decided to execute it was flawed. I know a lot of smart people worked on it and really tried very hard. And I think they just kind of rushed it because the mayor was going to be turned out of office, wanted to get something done before he left. But that needs some serious rework. And I think we're seeing that from top to bottom.
Thank you, Joe. Will?
I think there's a lot to like in the Complete Communities plan. I think no plan that complex is going to be perfect for you, but I think it's definitely starting to think about our problems as a city and as a region in a holistic way. I think that it has, again, good things to say about transit. I think Joe made some very good points about the way it deals with parks. And as far as housing is concerned, I think that the Complete Communities plan is itself not that complete a plan, and there's a lot to be filled in there as far as the mysteries in that plan. So we have a lot of work to do in the city. But what I want to always focus us back on is we have people in this town paying half or 70% of their income in rent. We have people working full-time jobs and being homeless, and we have not taken the responsibility to provide for the next generation as it comes along. And I think we should take that seriously as well.
Amazing. Thank you. And so we're going to switch a little as we've started talking about parks. And we have two questions here in regard to the Pure Water project. So I'm going to start with, should the Pure Water project be put on hold given the financial stresses on our city budget? When it was proposed, the price tag was 1.4 billion and now is estimated to cost 4.8 to 9 billion to complete. And Will, if you could please kick us off.
Well, if it's already going up, then it's not going to stop. And so I think no. I think that I think this San Diego needs to be a city that get things done. And I understand that people don't like the Pure Water project. I would rather have that pipeline be, frankly, somewhere else on the other side of the freeway. In that right of way would have been a better place, I think. But that didn't get done. And to say we have to stop time and stop all progress and work, I think it's going to be safe. I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be shooting geysers in the sky. We don't have to worry about that. I think some of the rhetoric has gotten a little heated. But as far as like, because of the city finances, we stop doing something, I don't think that makes sense because, you know, inflation goes one way and that's only going to get worse. So let's get this thing done.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I'm a supporter of Pure Water. I was on the original working group. Of course, the increasing cost, of course, is of concern. But we have to remember that the water utilities is an enterprise fund and is paid by the ratepayers. So we want to make sure we protect the general fund. You know, as a civil engineer, one of the things that has concerned me is the lack of value engineering on our infrastructure projects. And I look forward to bringing that conversation to the forefront, making sure that whether it's ratepayer dollars or taxpayer dollars, that we're spending our dollars effectively and we're getting our biggest bang for the buck, because it was mentioned we have such an infrastructure deficit. I also like to point out that part of the reason I supported the Pure Water is that it eliminated at least a $2 billion cost of upgrading the Point Loma treatment plant. And even today, several years later, we still do not have a permanent waiver at Point Loma. So that cost is still at risk as well. And I know that's a little tricky through the federal government, but we should move forward with the project.
Thank you, Joe. And second question here about the Pure Water project. Do you have any proposals to mitigate concerns of residents about odors, leaks, contamination, and noise? And Joe, if you could please start us off.
Sure. You know, there's always going to be concerns, and they're right to be concerned. These are a new element being you know, thrown into their community. And I remember the surprise I got, just like all the residents, about where the pipeline alignment was headed towards. You know, I appreciate the work that was done by Ruth DeSantis and others to negotiate a compromise and get some community improvements in exchange for that work. But this is what the job of the Water Utilities Department is really required to do. And they don't have a good track record. Let's be clear about that. That's another thing that we're going to be expecting. Us as city council members are going to be demanding of the mayor, who controls those various departments under the strong mayor form of government, to be on top of and to watch. I know we have odors wafting in from the landfill. I'm going to be Johnny on the spot. As those complaints come in, we're going to jump on them. It affects your quality of life. We deserve the city utilities department to do their job and take care of those issues as soon as they arise.
Thank you, Joe. Will?
Yeah, I think that some of the concerns about you know, really severe effects, you know, geysers and that type of thing I heard being talked about back when we were talking about this in 2018. Those are overblown. That's not the way the stuff works. But, you know, whenever you have a new sewage line, there's always, you know, it's going to be there for 30, 40 years. There occasionally is going to something, you know, at some point like 2032, something is going to go wrong and it's going to have to get fixed. The question is, how quickly does it get fixed? How responsive are we? How good a job do we do when we build the thing in the first place? And that's something that, you know, as your council member, I'll be making sure that gets done right, because I certainly, you know, don't want that sort of thing happening on my watch. And that's a responsibility we all take in. And I think we both take that sort of thing very, very seriously.
Thank you, Rob. All right, and then switching to parks, would you be in favor of improving access to Rose Canyon so more people can enjoy it? And Will, if you could start us off, please.
Yeah, I think the Rose Canyon is a great treasure. As we have this this very dense part of North UC, one of the things that when you live in a big apartment complex, that you have to go out and you have to look at nature. It's a human need. I went out in one of the MSTCs with a couple of our friends who I'm not going to name check because I don't want to embarrass them from the planning group, and they were telling me about the fairy shrimp and the gnatcatcher, and I just said, all right, stop. Let's be quiet for a second. And I just stood there and absorbed the nature because I'd been in this garage for about 5 months with the pandemic. And so we need to preserve that open space. We need to have access to that open space. I think we actually have pretty good access to Rose Canyon throughout our border areas of UC. I know there are little inlets here and there that I think do a pretty good job of that.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
We have, as was mentioned, there is some limited access to Rose Canyon. It is intended to be a natural habitat. The city was not a good steward of Rose Canyon back in the day. So there's a lot of man-made elements to it, utility lines, access roads, but the city's fortunately learned its lesson about trying to minimize that human impact on our what is supposed to be natural habitats. So I'm not in favor of a broad opening up. Having restricted access is what minimizes the number of individuals that get into Rose Canyon. And that's going to be important to preserve the natural habitat and the habitat values that exist out there in Rose Canyon. So I know there was a conversation the other day by the city about putting some significant bike lanes through the Rose Canyon to get folks from one side to the other. I would not be supportive of that. I'll see where it falls in the community plan update, but I would not be supportive of that idea.
Thank you, Joe. Switching to another natural element, is there any, all of District 1, and specifically University City, is an area of canyons and mesas. What will you do to ensure that existing homes and structures are as fire safe as possible? And what is your plan to fund those thoughts? Joe, if you could go ahead and start us off.
Sure. Again, you broke up a little bit, but I think I got the gist of your question. Yes, I think we've all become much more aware of the risk of danger with the increasing temperatures, the tragic fires we saw up and down the state. This is no longer just an issue for our eastern communities that are on the front line of the wildland interface. It's something we all have to be cognizant of. And it's a tough conversation because a lot of the homes that were built were not built with that issue in mind. They don't have the kind of construction that is required today when you build in those fire risk areas. And so it is going to be a tough conversation. I think we're going to look at programs where we can convert people's roofs to more fire resistant roofs. A lot of the problems often come from embers that float from adjacent fires. We have to be very thoughtful, but very careful about actually having fuel modification zones around our structures and our homes. That has to be done balanced with the natural habitat. But I think we can do that when we work together. That's the most important thing. We all work together on this.
Thank you, Joe. Well.
Yeah, well, we need to definitely be careful about the residential canyon interface. I lived in a house that was right at the mouth of the canyon, right at that little tiny pocket park on Cather. And you imagine the fire coming up the hill. We need to make fuel mitigation a concern when we get in a bad fire season situation. We've all stood there at various times. I had to pack up all my stuff when I was living in UC and put it in the car and drive, get ready to drive out of town back when the 2007 fires happened. And we're all very concerned about that. And those houses do predate some of the code improvements we had in the late 70s and the 80s that helped really mitigate the risk of home fires. And so we do need to do some retrofitting, some rehabilitation, and much like they've helped the folks over near the airport put in double pane glass to deal with modernization there, I think we can do some things like that here in University City.
Thank you, Will. Switching topics a little, if elected, what types of policies will you support and actions will you take to create a hunger-free San Diego? And Will, if you could start us off, please.
Well, hunger comes from poverty. And listen, I grew up poor. We moved in with my grandmother, and we lived on her Social Security checks, three kids and my mom, for several years back in the late '80s. And you know when they didn't even have a reduced lunch program at my high school, everybody was on reduced lunch. It was 55 cents for lunch. So our schools do a good job of accommodating hunger. Obviously, we don't have a lot of control over the schools, but what we can do is try to mitigate poverty. And one of the ways we mitigate poverty is we observe that one of the reasons San Diego is such an expensive place to live in, especially and even considering the salaries that people make here, is the fact that we have to pay extra for housing. We have to pay extra for all of our products because the land that the businesses we buy things from are very, very expensive. And so we need to make sure that our people can afford to live here in all of the other specs, and that will itself reduce hunger.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
We have some amazing, in addition to the state and federal programs that make sure that when kids go to school, that they have a full belly, that there's no better way to learn than when you're not hungry as a child. And we have an amazing philanthropic population here in San Diego that time and time again, the volume that has increased on the San Diego Food Bank, I wish I could remember the numbers, but it has been dramatic. Volunteers continue to show up, donations continue to flow in, and during COVID, when so many people have lost jobs, they've really stepped up. Even labor organizations have stepped up as well. And that's part of the answer. The other part of the answer is working with the County of San Diego as a partner through their Health and Human Services, because they get a lot of state and federal dollars that can meet some of those short-term needs. We have an unbalanced economy right now. We're always going to struggle with that, but having enough food for people is a critical part of that conversation.
Thank you, Joe. Switching a little here, what would you do to improve community relations, response times, and address racial tensions in regard to the police? And Joe, if you could go ahead and start us off, that would be great.
Sure. We talked a little bit about that at the UCCA meeting beforehand. The captain, as I mentioned earlier, owned up to the fact that the response was not what it really should have been. And that's really a first step to building confidence. I know there's a lot of respect and trust in the police department here in University City and throughout District 1, but we have some challenges in some of our underserved communities. I'm proud to have served on the Police Community Relations Board, trying to address that. It's not about defund the police. In fact, I've been an advocate for increasing the number of police. We heard one of the problems in that awful incident with the rabbi was not having patrols in the area. And we need to change that. We also need to get the officers out of their cars and walking the beat. That changes dramatically the relationships with the residents and the businesses. But we also need to look at recruitment, training, pretext stops are ways that we can begin to change the conversation and rebuild the trust between all communities and our police department.
Thank you, Joe. Will, did you already answer this question? No,
not yet. So I'm going to harken back to how I grew up and where I'm from. I grew up in a neighborhood that, the police would come and harass folks when you didn't call them, but when you did call them, they didn't come at all. And we didn't have the confidence in our police force back then. In that neighborhood, I was the only white kid in the neighborhood. To give some context to that, we didn't have the kind of confidence that got the law enforced. Here in San Diego, we definitely do a somewhat better job. We have some problems though, but we need to make sure that we address them as a whole community. We don't lay them all off on the police to solve, because we're the ones who sometimes, will say somebody looks suspicious in our neighborhood and we'll call the police on what's not a very legitimate call. So let's make sure we make those legitimate calls, such as probably should have been done with this group of kids running around harassing people in UC, and take responsibility for ourselves. I think that we have a long way to go, but I'm proud to have the support of our local police officers in this campaign, because they know we're all going to work together.
you will. And how do you think the City Council should respond to the issue of local militia groups, such as Defend East County? And Will, if you can go ahead and kick us off.
Well, I think that let's recognize that if those people were anything but white, they would just be called a gang, and they would be dealt with accordingly. And I think that that's something we should all just take a moment to sit with and understand that that's the reason we call them militias. And I think when you have people out there, threatening violence at otherwise peaceful rallies, showing up with AK-47s to folks that are just at a Black Lives Matter protest, I think that should be dealt with swiftly, and the people should be kept safe. I think brandishing weapons at peaceful protesters is not something that should be tolerated. I think wearing swastikas in public should, frankly, be met with a very, very aggressive response that I won't give my real opinion right here, but privately, I have some thoughts about that. Because not responding aggressively to that sort of thing is how you get little 12-year-olds and such, beating up on rabbis. And we can't have that. We have to say no to that in our community.
Thank you, Will. Joe? Oh, Joe, you're on mute.
A little background noise here. I think as elected officials, we have a responsibility to take strong positions on these kinds of issues. The gang suppression unit here in the city of San Diego deals with gangs of color, and also deals with white gangs as well. It's not normally known. And that's one of the reasons that we don't have quite the issues here in the city of San Diego. We can't tolerate that kind of behavior, especially when it affects people of color. When there are peaceful protesters, they have a right to protest peacefully, of course. And we should have zero tolerance. And what amounts to a hate crime, as the incident with the rabbi has been identified, should concern all of us. One of the things that I'll kind of step out and say is that I'm a little leery of resolutions because it's too easy for elected officials to hide behind a resolution. We need to think about the most effective way. Is it the city's job? Is it the county's job? Is it the county sheriff's job? Let's have those conversations and make sure we jump in with an action item, not just more talk.
Thank you, Joe. Switching gears again, what is your take on the SANDAG's 5 Big Moves plan? And Joe, if you can go ahead and start us off.
I know some of us call it SANDAG, but I appreciate you spelling out the letters.
I thought it was around.
I'm excited by the SANDAG's 5 Big Moves. It's far-reaching. There's been a little bit of trouble at SANDAG. They can't seem to quite escape, which means people are not going to have confidence. And if you don't have confidence, you're not going to be able to pass the bond measures that are going to be necessary. And the question is, how do we future-proof these ideas? They're very exciting. I've been debriefed on them, and there's so many different layers to them. One of the reasons I call it the 5 Big Moves. So I'm very excited about that. But the question is, how do we really plunge forward? I'm more interested in relocating the train tracks as they pass by the city of Del Mar on the coastal bluffs. I think that has to be our #1 priority. That's a very expensive fix. Let's figure out how we do that, and then we can begin to tackle the 5 big moves.
Thank you, Joe. Well?
Yeah, well, I think that I was very impressed that they came out with an aggressive plan. The 5 Big Moves was definitely better than the plan that it replaced, which was 0 big moves, right? We live in a world where we all sit in traffic a lot. And I talk to a lot of people, and Joe and I both talk to a lot of people. And if you ask people what the main dissatisfaction, like what do you hate about your day, they will often tell you, I sit in my car by myself a lot and it's kind of miserable. And so we have structured our cities around this mode of transportation that's not really healthy for us. It makes us fat. It's bad for the environment. And we have to do it because that's how you get to work. But wouldn't it be nice to have some options? So a lot of public transit advocates for a long time have said, if you are in your car, you're bad. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think the conversation you have is, how do we get you and me where we want to go, when we want to get there safely, as quickly and cheaply as possible? And if we ask ourselves that question over the next couple of decades, we're going to have a much better transit system than we have today.
Thank you, Will. And would the candidates support the consolidation of North and South UC Development impact fee funds for projects that are used and benefit all University City residents? Please explain your response. Will, if you can go ahead and start us off.
I have a little technical skepticism about this, because what I don't want to see happen is somebody go in, consolidate the whole thing, and there's a number of funds that are dedicated for various purposes. If you go in and consolidate that whole thing, and then you try to build a project, say you would try to improve Stanley Park with that money that happens to have some of the North UC money in it, you might catch a lawsuit. And then maybe you turn out to be wrong, maybe you turn out to be right, but it's 3 or 4 years down the road. I would rather have dedicated funding that doesn't have to bridge that gap unless we're absolutely certain as to the legality of it, which I frankly don't think we are. It's a 50-50 shot at best. So I would rather have, we shouldn't have to play games with how we fix our parks, and we should just fix the parks. Right now we have some of our jewels of this neighborhood that are a little bit run down, and we're going to be creative with how we do it. Is that the method? If I'm confident that it'll legally stick, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
That's an important question. It's awfully frustrating when the North UC area has several millions of dollars sitting in the pot, and I believe South UC has actually been zeroed out, if I understood correctly. We didn't, when we did our older neighborhoods and we did these developer impact fees, we didn't really think it through. That's why we're ending up with the problems that we're having today. There's some fundamental issues with developer impact fees, and I won't go into it this evening. But I know that with the community plan update that there is a proposal to consolidate North and South UC starting now going forward. There's going to be a lot of new development in North UC based on what I saw in the community plan update. So I expect there to be a lot of robust funds generated that will be used for the entire University City community. It won't solve all the problems that were identified, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Joe. In non-COVID times, the UTC area is gridlocked. How is the area supposed to handle 2,000 workers at the Costa Verde remodel? Joe, you can start us off there.
Sure. As my colleague mentioned, traffic congestion is one of the biggest issues, but there are tools available to us. One of the things that I heard over and over again at the community planning group when they were debating this project, which they ultimately did approve, was that how could you estimate how much people would use the Midcoast trolley, which has its terminus right at Costa Verde. The city forces you to go pretty low expectation, but I think there's a lot of hope that the number will actually be much, much higher. And if we can get serious about developing real bike lanes, complete bike lanes and routes, there's another opportunity there as well. I'm looking forward to the traffic demand management. I'm looking for some of the climate action plan goals that restrict how people actually get into that project. We're seeing that at Westfield being implemented already. And I think that there may be some impact. I don't think it will be as dramatic as people are afraid.
Thank you, Joe. Will?
So UC it's a commuter destination. So 96,000-ish people work in UC, and close to between 30 and 40,000 people live in UC. So the neighborhood just breathes in and out 60,000 people a day. A lot of those people are students. If we put them on campus, then they're not driving past us and creating, those traffic problems elsewhere in the city. And a lot of them won't even have cars if they're living on campus, if they're anything like I was as a college student. But how do you accommodate 2,000 workers at Costa Verde? Well, you figure it out. We can't, stifle our entire community in the thought that traffic's going to happen, because traffic is a thing that is just a product of the way we've structured our entire society. And if you say traffic's going to go there, well, that's just to say that something useful is happening there that people are going to want to go do. So let's figure it out. We're a big boy city, and we can put on our pants and figure out how to get people around.
Thank you. What is your position on Proposition E? Does the Midway Community Planning Group's endorsement of this impact your position? And Will, if you can go ahead and start us off there.
I'm in favor of Proposition E. I really don't see why this is even a controversy. The Midway area, you've been to the Midway area. It's terrible. You got the weird strip club, the lay girls thing. Nobody wants that. The actual sports arena was the subject of a sitcom 9 years ago on ABC that turned out not to be that great. Should have been better. It had Allison Janney in it. I watched it, but nobody else did. But that neighborhood needs to be revamped. It needs to have that height limit removed. It's not, the nose under the tent that's going to destroy the height limit. Nobody's proposing this in La Jolla or Pacific Beach or Point Loma. It never should have been in the 1972 proposal in the first place. And it's just this rundown part of town that's near so many more vital parts of town so we can have people living there, people working there, and really take care of a lot of our problems by just adjusting this blighted neighborhood where we got a Padre stabbed. It was so bad. That's how bad this thing is. We got a Padre stabbed yesterday, and we need to pass Measure E and fix this thing.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
Well, I think to your question, I have to chuckle a little bit. Politicians who have badmouthed planning groups for years suddenly ran over to embrace the Midway Community Plan because, we like their decision. We should listen to the planning group in this case. The impact of the planning group's vote on that doesn't really affect my support of Measure E. As others have mentioned, it has been a neglected part of our city, and yet it's almost essentially in the heart of our city, close to transit, close to freeways. I'm a little concerned about the ability to deliver all the infrastructure that community plan build out is going to actually need. And I'm a little concerned when Measure E promises affordable homes because I'm not sure that really is going to manifest itself as people might expect it to. But I'm supportive of Measure E. As others have said, it was incorrectly drawn into the original Prop D because freeways were easy boundaries. I will be a staunch defender that height limit doesn't change anymore past that Midway westerly boundary.
Thank you, Joe. How would you improve large real estate transactions so that the city doesn't lose money and isn't on the hook for indemnifications? Examples provided include 101 Ash, the skydiving facility in Mission Valley, and the San Diego State University Stadium deal. And Joe, if you can go ahead and start us off, that would be great.
Sure. You gave us quite a laundry list, and it certainly points out to how many times something has gone wrong. That's it really is. There's a couple of functions here. Under the strong mayor form of government, the mayor takes his time with working with his staff about developing an idea and deciding when to bring it to city council. The city council is then pressured to ratify that without spending a due diligence amount of time. And that equation has to change. The city council has an important function in approving real estate deals, and we have to be given the time to do the due diligence. Some have suggested that the independent budget analyst is perhaps a place to create a resource that could look at real estate deals a little more carefully. I'm open to that idea. I'm not sure that's the best idea, but we really have to slow it down. I'm looking forward with my civil engineering and the number of real estate deals that I've worked on over the years to doing a more diligent job. You voters, you have to pick a mayor that you think will do the best job there.
Thank you. Will?
Well, this is kind of a function of the city structure. I think that it is the council's responsibility to make sure you're a check on the mayor, that you're given a second voice there. It's definitely something, making those deals is something that's in the executive branch, but the legislature does have a role there. I think when we passed the strong mayor a decade plus ago, we didn't end up implementing the legislative branch side of that. So we don't have the oversight capability robustly enough at the council level to really get that done. We get 7-8 staff members, enough budget for that, which really allows us, people to do a couple of policy spots and somebody to come and observe the community. But that doesn't leave enough expertise over to be able to read complex land deals. Now, I happen to be able to do that because that's my training as an attorney for the last 18 years. But I wouldn't count on my ability to do that in addition as the council member, because that's not something the council members should do. You have staff dedicated to that. We have to have that oversight capability, and we need to adjust the way we think of ourselves as a council.
Thank you, Will. All right, the parks seem to have skeleton crews. Do you have a plan to add more maintenance workers to each shift to maintain sprinklers, trim trees and bushes, general maintenance, etc.? And Will, if you can start us off, please.
Um, I would love to tell you I have a plan to add more staff, but we're in a $300 million budget hole right now, and we're not going to have an opportunity to really raise revenue. Even if Prop 15 tax passes, the smart thing to do is going to be to reduce other kinds of revenue and even the trail ends to Prop 15 until we get out of this recession. So that's going to be a tough sell. I know that we need to do that maintenance. I know that the medians that we have on Regents going south, and even on Governor itself, get the weeds grow up. We've had private people actually go out and weed whack them in ways that aren't entirely safe. But when the city's not getting it done, I can't blame somebody for taking things into their own hands. So we definitely need that maintenance to get done. As far as additional staff to do it, I would love to look for that in the budget, but I don't think it would be responsible for me to promise that right now.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
Yeah, that's going to be a tough conversation. We did some budget cuts last June for the current fiscal year, and I think when we get the new revenue projections, we're probably looking at additional budget cuts. The sad thing is not only the appearance and people's ability to enjoy the park, it is our investment of our tax dollars to build those parks. And every day that you don't maintain it, it just gets it that much more expensive to bring them up to reasonable standards. And unfortunately, I'm going to share the same pessimistic view that it is going to be difficult until we really climb out of this pandemic and the shortfall in the revenue to better understand where we're going to get to in terms of restoring city services. The one thing I'll kind of throw in there is that one of the things I've been continually frustrating is how difficult the city makes it for volunteers to get involved with improving city projects. I don't like people dipping into their pockets to deal with city facilities, but when they're willing to do that, we have to make it a lot easier to do that. So I'll be supporting that kind of approach.
Thank you, Joe. And similarly, if elected, would you have a plan to address the eroded rights of asylum seekers and immigrants, especially at the southern border? Excuse me. And Joe, if you could please start us out.
Sure, that is one thing that continues to plague us, the behavior of the federal government and not striking the right balance between compassion and human dignity and the laws of the land. The city doesn't have a lot of options within its jurisdiction to be able to deal with that. We can continue to bring pressure as elected officials. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan of resolutions, which is easy for elected officials to point to, but doesn't really change anything. I'm certainly going to be supportive of the nonprofits that are willing to put themselves out there to fight for those rights. And when I am approached by things that the city can do, we'll certainly be open and receptive. Irrespective of how an individual got there, they deserve the dignity. That's who we are as a people, who we are as a country. I would certainly like to believe that, and we can do much better and still protect the public safety of San Diegans.
Thank you, Joe. Will?
Joe, I think that was really, really well put, and I appreciate that. That's not who we are. We don't send people back to war zones. We are America. That's what we're built on. That's that's how we like to think of ourselves anyway. I had some anti-immigration person ask me what I would do about them, and I said, "Man, I'm from Georgia. I'm from physically farther away than some of these folks who are coming here. I can't say anything about this." And so I think we have a responsibility to be welcoming. I think we have a responsibility to recognize that the people in our community are our neighbors, no matter what their legal status, where they came from. And I think we have to further recognize that if we wrap our individual cities' law enforcement up in a regime that pushes people out of the legal environment, then we create eddies of lawlessness around ourselves where we can't enforce law, where people don't feel comfortable relying on the civic infrastructure that we have. So I think we need to recognize that we're all neighbors, we're all friends, and we all are here as San Diegans together, however we got here.
Thank you, Will. All right, this will be our last question. Do you think that gender and/or racial bias exists in city government? And if so, what would you do to help eliminate it? And Will, you can go ahead and start us off, please.
Well, of course it does. I mean, of course it does. We have gender, racial, all of the biases, sexual identity, sexual orientation, are all things that we all have biases about. And I think that the right thing to do is admit that we have different parts of our community that don't feel integrated into the whole and haven't had their voices heard for a very long time. And I'm glad that we're progressing on getting some good work done on that. I happen to be from a community where I was the only white guy in the room for a lot of time, many years, and that gave me a different perspective about what the way people talk when other white people aren't around, and we don't always do a good job. There are other white people on the call. We're not doing a great job, so we can do better. But these days, I hear more people taking responsibility and more people opening up, and I think we need formal programs at the city that are going to get that done.
Thank you, Will. Joe?
Sure, an important question. And, I think any institution of that scale, you got over 10,000 employees, that you're going to have those problems. And the issue is, how do we deal with that? We have departments at the city that are tracking that kind of information. We have hotlines to file those complaints. What we need is more reporting, and make it a lot bit easier for people to be more comfortable in reporting when they've been exposed to those kinds of bias, whether it is how they're being treated on the job, whether it is their eligibility for promotion. We have to root out. I want the city of San Diego to be a leader in this and to inspire other industries across our region. And also look at best practices. That's a difficult conversation because it's so deeply rooted, and we don't even begin to understand how our tone, our language, our words even affect other individuals. But we can do better. We will do better.
Thank you, Joe. Before our candidates give their closing remarks, I want to thank each and every attendee for submitting amazing questions and making this dialogue as good as it was this evening. So thank you, each and every one of you. Please be sure you are registered to vote and that your address is correct. You can go to sdvote.com. We'll also put that in the chat because remembering links is hard. And also, please be sure to fill out your census form, and we'll also put the link in the chat for that as well. Please attend more league events. We can't wait to see you at more of these. We do prop talks. We do all sorts of things to make sure that you feel fully educated and empowered when facing your ballot and understanding about local government. And now for the candidates' closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and we will go ahead and begin with Joe. Joe, please take it away.
Okay, well, thank you for moderating this event. Thank you to the League for hosting, as well as UCCA. Very grateful to get this information out to those of you who have not voted. I will put a plug in, be looking for a community event to support our brothers and sisters in the congregation. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but maybe something this weekend. That's important for us coming together as a community. I think this forum continues to highlight that there are differences between the two of us. One of the things I like to highlight is the fact that I'm a civil engineer and the kind of expertise that I'll be bringing to the table that we haven't seen on City Council before. And for example, when that pure water program gets built through Governor, how are we going to do that traffic control to make sure emergency vehicles are actually able to get through during rush hour? I did that in the Bird Rock project, and there are ways to do that, but we got to keep a sharp eye and keep everybody safe. And we got to make sure we keep that rapid response station open during that construction to maximize public safety here in University City. I'm very proud to be supported by a number of environmental organizations, both in protecting natural habitat as well as fighting climate change. These are serious conversations that we need to be having that goes directly to our quality of life and goes to the quality of life of our future generations. I'm very proud that people are supporting me because they've watched me over the past 16 years provide leadership, bringing people to the table, being more of a listener. We don't need divisive action. We need people that are building coalitions, building consensus, so we can start tackling some of these big city issues that have been ignored for far too long. I like to talk about walking and chewing gum at the same time. I can be there for you for your individual issues, but I'll be there tackling the big issues as well. Now, I'm very proud of the grassroots efforts being supported by people who live in the district and not being supported by people with downtown interests in the building industry that have other agendas. I urge you to vote for me, Joe LaCava, for District 1. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Joe. Will?
Well, I am very grateful to be here this evening in front of, the University City community, which is really the heart of the District 1 area. Um, I've been working for this community for a very long time. I've always been a volunteer. I've never been paid to try to influence the decisions that get made by the city. I've never been a registered lobbyist. I've always, in fact, I've refused payments on a couple of pro bono things where people tried to pay me. I'm the guy that people call. I had a friend of mine tell me the other day, well, I remember you advised that that nonprofit of this friend I had call you a couple of years ago. I didn't remember that. I just pick up the phone. I help people out. And I've been doing that for years. And I've done okay in my career advising small businesses that really don't ever have business before the city. But it's time for the citizens to step up in this town. Come a little bit from the outside, and the citizens need to step up and say this is enough of doing things the old way. We've formed enough committees. We've had enough talks. We have people living out in the street. We have hepatitis outbreaks. We are treating ourselves like a small town. We got big town problems, and we've all been relatively successful. That's why we're in District 1. Let's admit it's a nice district. It's relatively affluent. We're all doing okay, but we don't approach our city problems in the way that got us here. If I had approached my life the way San Diego sometimes approaches its problems, I'd still be back in Macon. And I don't think that's the way we need to be doing things here in San Diego. We need to think about our children's future. We need to have folks who come in with fresh ideas, with aggressive leadership, and get things done. And I, for my entire career, have helped people come together, asking and getting to the bottom of what people's real interests are and get below the talking points. And that's how we make change here in San Diego. We're all going to come together. We're going to be a single community, and we're going to do very, very well. And I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Will. As a reminder, the views expressed are those of the candidates, not of the League of Women Voters. On behalf of the University City Community Association and the League of Women Voters of San Diego, I want to thank the candidates for running for office and attending our forum this evening. I know you've been on a lot of Zooms, so we appreciate you making the time to come to this one. And thank you again. You are here tonight because you are following the League motto. Don't just be a voter, be an informed voter. Registered voters will receive their ballot in the mail. You probably already have yours. Drop it off or mail it in by November 3rd and encourage others to vote as well. Thank you and have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Good night.